Hi, everyone. This is Lindsay DeMoose, licensed marriage and family therapist, and this is Check In, Not Out. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lindsay DeMoose, Stress First Aid Navigator, and we're going to build another skill in this episode. In introducing this tool, we're going to start by just taking note of any of these thoughts or feelings that you may have experienced in your life. What about feeling, I am just completely overwhelmed right now. Nothing is going the way that I want it to go. And no matter what I try to do, nothing gets better. How about, why is everybody out to get me? This just feels like the day is like one issue after another, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to handle this. Maybe you've even been stuck in traffic and you'd be like, why me? I'm late. I just need to figure out how to make these cars go faster. I'm going to lose my mind. Or, oh my gosh, my kids are driving me crazy. Why are they making it as impossible for me today as they are? Even something like, I hate my body. I don't like the way that I look right now, and I really wish that there was something I could do about it. If you're human, you probably can relate to some degree of these experiences. I know I definitely can. I have an evolving relationship with control, and I can certainly relate to how challenging it is to struggle with things that are not the way that I want them to be, no matter how hard I try. So, in this episode, what we're going to talk about today is what we call radical acceptance. This is a skill that is used in mindfulness practice and specifically within dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, which is a fantastic therapy that was created by psychologist Dr. Marsha Linehan. And it's a useful way to be able to manage our reactivity in situations that are not within our control. Therefore, changing our relationship to control and also giving us the ability to better manage stressful situations in our lives. In my last episode, I touched on this ever so slightly, and I'm going to open it up more today so that you can start to build your toolkit, better manage situations in the moment instead of losing your cool, or instead of trying the same thing over and over and over again and getting nowhere, or instead of taking your stress out on others and yourself, etc. Radical acceptance helps us to feel more in control of ourselves and our lives despite life really happening exactly the way that it does. So, life being on life's terms, this is what radical acceptance helps us to be able to manage. I actually have a pretty good example to give you that speaks to how helpful radical acceptance can be. Now, all last week I was working on this episode, and radical acceptance had very much been in my mind, obviously, because I was working pretty diligently on it. And I had this like hypothetical situation that I was going to use in the episode. And wouldn't you know it, over this past weekend, I went through a situation where I really needed to use this tool, and I'm so glad that I used it. It's fascinating just in the course of the work that I do, where things are like, I'm actively practicing them so I can teach them to others, and then I'm just gifted with opportunities. This is sometimes my way of reframing a situation, but I'm gifted with these opportunities to be able to use them. And again, I'm just so thankful that I had used radical acceptance to handle myself in this situation where I very much would have lost control had I not been thinking about this. So I'm going to get into the story to really frame this, but before I tell you about the situation, I need to give you some background information to tee up how the situation even happened to me in the first place. My husband and I moved into a new house, well, new to us, a few months ago, and at the front door, the handle to open and close the door is actually a deadbolt, and it's such that you can push in a button at the side of the door, at the door frame, to set it in a lock or unlock position. And so we learned really quickly that we do not like it to be in the lock position. We always have it in the unlocked position. And for that reason, just in general, we have a spare key. And just about a month ago, my husband and I were leaving to go out of town for a few weeks. So regarding the spare key, I usually know where it is, But fast forward to the day that we were actually leaving for the airport, our Uber was in the front of the house, and my husband runs to the backyard and he says to me, "I'm moving the spare key. I'll tell you where it is later." Okay, no problem. So we leave, and my sister-in-law, who's my brother's sister, she lives about 15-20 minutes away from us. She comes over to our house intermittently while we're gone to check on things, which was so fantastic. My husband had given her a key, and that was really helpful for her to be there while we were gone. So we come home from our trip. My husband is invited to go up to Mammoth to go hiking for an extended weekend. So he basically turns around a few days after we come home and he goes to Mammoth with one of our dogs, leaving me to be home with our geriatric dog and my cat. And so a few days into this period of time, one morning, I check our Ring camera every morning. We live right by a canyon, and so there's animals that come up from the canyon, and sometimes there are coyotes. And so every morning before I let my dogs out in the front yard that's gated, I always check the Ring camera to make sure that there's nothing that was there or close by or any sort of danger. And so what I noticed in the Ring was, this is a long story short for this note, I had noticed that there was a homeless man that had been walking on the sidewalk in front of my house at like 11 p.m. the night before and basically passes out. I can't make this up. Passes out on the sidewalk in front of my house. And so when I was checking the Ring at 6 the next day, I realized that he was still there and still hopefully sleeping. I called my husband. I was like, "What should I do?" He's like, "Call 911." I was like, "Wait a second. I should just go see if he's alive, first of all." And so I walked outside. He was sleeping. I woke him up. I asked him to leave. He left. It was fine. Called my husband to tell him everything was okay. And my husband was like, "You know what? You should just make sure that all the windows are locked and everything. Just make sure that the house is safe." I was like, "Okay, good call." I also pushed in the button of the deadbolt for our front door. So I go to work, come home from work later. This is Friday night. And I thought I had unlocked the bolt from our front door. But I didn't unlock anything else. This is Saturday morning, and I have a spirituality group that I drive up to in North County once a month. This was going to be a long group that we had. It's like a special retreat. So I needed to get up there at 9. I swear all these details are going somewhere. I needed to get up there at 9. I had all of my stuff ready to go. This was like 8:15, and I grabbed my geriatric dog Buddy. I was like, "Hey Buddy, let's go for a quick walk." All of my stuff is on our dining room table in the house, including my phone. I just needed to take Buddy for a walk. I just needed to also use the restroom and brush my teeth. But I was like, I'll just do that before I leave. I grab him, close the front door, and as soon as it latches, I was like, oh my gosh, is that locked? Of course, I try to open it and it's locked. So I thought that I had unlocked it from the night before, and apparently I either pushed that button in and then unpushed it or something. I don't know. So I'm like, oh shoot, I am locked out. And I can see my purse with my keys inside from inside the house while I'm standing outside. Then I realize, okay, I've locked everything in my hypervigilance from just the day before. So I go around the house trying to see if there's like anything that I missed. This is always like a good way to be able to tell how difficult or easy it is to break into your house, is if you actually need to break in and you cannot. So that's what I had found. I had walked around like 3/4 of my house on the first floor and was like, oh my gosh, I closed everything up and I cannot get in. So then I was like, I have a spare key, but I don't know where it is. Let me try and see if it's in the garage. While this is happening, I am calling my husband from my Apple Watch, because my phone is also inside, calling him from my Apple Watch, and it keeps going right to voicemail, which means that he is hiking, and he's going to be hiking for a few hours, so he's not going to be able to answer the phone because he does not have service on most of the trails in Mammoth. So I go into my garage, I'm looking around, I'm trying to figure out from my husband's mindset, where would he put this key? and I cannot find anything. Therefore, I am like realizing, oh my gosh, I need to start gearing up to radically accept that I might be stuck. So then I'm like, you know what? Let me just call my sister-in-law, who I know she's awake, and let me see if she knows where the key is. So I call her, was like, hey, do you have a key of ours? And she's like, yeah, I do. I was meaning to ask you if it was the spare key, if it was my key, but I have it. And I was like, okay, I don't know if it's a spare key or not, but where did you find it? She's like, well, I found it in a pod outside your garage. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure that's the spare key. This is what I'm saying to myself. And then the real panic sets in because I'm like, oh my gosh, is this a spare key or not? I guess it doesn't really matter. I ask her, hey, I have to leave. Like, I'm already late. Can you come over? I've got the dog outside with me. I got to go brush my teeth. Like, I really, really need help. Can you come? Now, my sister-in-law is a lot of wonderful things, but she is not someone who transitions well at all. She really needs a decent amount of a heads up. She is not necessarily equipped to be able to drop everything and pivot. So when all was said and done, and I asked, hey, can you come over right now? She had a lot of things that she thought that she really needed to prioritize in the day. And long story short, she was like, I can't come over until noon. And so at this point it was 8:30. She's like, I can't come over till noon. I'm sorry. Is there anybody else that you can call in, or is there anything else that you can do? And I was like, girl, you are my last resort. You can't come over. Oh my goodness. But she was very determined to stick to what her timeline was for the day. While I'm having this conversation with her, I am really holding my tongue because, first of all, I don't know if she actually has her spare key or not. Second of all, she will not come over when I need her to come over. And finally, I am stuck, like for sure stuck. So this is where I'm like, all right, Lindsay, you've got to use radical acceptance. Just note that at this point, I really wanted to freak out. Like, I wanted to freak out on my sister-in-law and shout something along the lines of, are you kidding me? You can't come over. I'm in distress. I'm in a really tight situation. I just need your help. You have a key. I understand you have a lot of things going on, but like, you really can't help me out. You have my key. Can you please just get over here? That's where I had to very much connect with, hey, what do you actually have control over? Like, if it was an emergency, if I really wanted to push, I could probably do it, and I could much more demand that she show up and drop her plans and come over. But I had enough information to identify that this wasn't necessarily her responsibility. I didn't have the full picture of what was going on. And the most important thing to me at that point was not losing my cool. That was really just a central thing that I continued to try to stay connected to was I do not want to lose my ish on this person that may not actually be obliged to help me out. This may not actually be her doing that she needs to drop everything and assist me with. As a result of staying grounded, I was like, okay, now I have to explore my options. What options do I have? And so I look at my dog and I say, buddy, we are going for a longer walk. So that's where I'm going to leave it for now. I'm going to talk about the tool, and then I will tell you about how this situation panned out because I was able to rely on the magic of radical acceptance. So radical acceptance, this is, like I said, from DBT. Now, what it is, I'm going to take this from the DBT workbook, word for word, in the next minute. Radical acceptance means that we have to radically accept something all the way, complete and total. We can't like partially accept it, decide we're going to accept it later. Like, we are accepting a situation in the moment as it exactly is and nothing else. We are accepting that situation in our minds, our hearts, and our body all the way through, okay? What DBT says about radical acceptance is that when you stop fighting reality, you stop throwing temper tantrums because reality is not the way that you want it, and you let go of bitterness. That is all radical acceptance. So when we stop fighting reality, we stop freaking out because things are not going the way that we want, and we let go of bitterness because we are not getting what we want. That is radical acceptance. So what this sounded like in my head was, I am totally stuck and stranded. This is my absolute reality. There's nothing that I can do to change this reality. Furthermore, my sister-in-law is exactly who she is. She isn't anyone else. I know that she does not transition well, and I cannot change her. I can't impose my beliefs on her in this moment. I need to radically accept that this is exactly who she is, and I need to continue in this moment to wholeheartedly identify and accept that she is going to act the exact way that she's supposed to react. Everything that she was doing was no different than the person that she is. Furthermore, said to myself, I could completely throw a fit and yell at my sister-in-law and tell her to drop what she's doing because she, I think, has my key. Then because she has my key, this is on her and she needs to handle this because this is her responsibility, despite how much it messes up her morning. But if I do that, is she actually going to come any sooner? What's going to happen to our relationship if I yell at her and tell her she needs to drop everything and come over right now? Are there any alternative actions that I can take? This was the key thought. Are there any alternative actions that I can take instead of losing it on the person who may or may not actually have my spare key? So that's when I was like, all right, buddy, we're going for a walk. So what the DBT workbook also says about radical acceptance is, number one, rejecting reality does not change reality. Just because you don't like something does not make it magically disappear or change. Just because I don't like a situation does not mean that I actually have the power to undo it. So we can open this up to things that we have to accept about people that we work with, about our patients, how they're treating us. I know obviously there are exceptions to things like any sort of emotional, physical violence. That's a different story. Changes in the hospital, who people are in our lives at work, in our lives outside of work, what is happening to us in a particular moment in time, whether, again, it's inside of work or outside of work. Just because we don't like something does not mean that it's not actually happening. What DBT also says is that changing reality first requires accepting reality. If outside of the moment, I want to look at my options for reacting to a situation and reacting because of a situation, I first have to radically accept that this is in fact happening. And I'll talk about options for change in a minute. And what DBT says is that rejecting reality turns pain into suffering. It also keeps us stuck when we are rejecting reality. And speaking of stuck, refusing to accept reality can keep us stuck in unhappiness, bitterness, anger, sadness, shame, painful emotions. So what this is saying is that we have to be responsible for ourselves with regard to our actions, our emotions, our reactions, regardless of the situation. We have to check in with ourselves and handle stuff first before we come to terms with what we can actually do about it. But that is the most important thing, is not losing your cool and making things worse as a result of having lost your cool. Just know also, when I say losing your cool, I'm not saying that you have to be like stoic or placid or like, oh, everything's fine. What I mean is not taking things out on other people in the moment because something is not going the way that you want it to go. There is a difference between a really unfortunate, awful, like not ideal situation where we are uncomfortable and don't know what to do versus like actually being stuck in suffering because in part of our own actions or reactions to the very thing that we cannot control. Does that make sense? The idea of all of this, what I'm trying to say, is that we have to practice acknowledging what is happening in these types of moments without anger, grudges, bitterness, reactivity. It's accepting reality without asking, why me? Why is this happening to me? What is the meaning of this? We have to roll with it, lean into it, actually wholeheartedly recognize what's happening in the moment. So what does radical acceptance actually look like? I'm setting up the framework for what it is, but what does it look like? So first of all, it's recognizing that you are in a situation, a moment, you're being exposed to something or someone, and you either want to change it but can't, you don't like it, it's not going your way, or that anything that you're trying to do to fix it or get yourself out of it isn't working, right? Like you're stuck. Next, this is where you check in with yourself real quick. Zoom out. Hey, how am I doing? You can ask, what color am I right now? What am I feeling? What do I want to do about this right now? And after we check in and find out like what's going on, what we get to ask ourselves is, if I do the thing that I want to do right now, does that either align with my acceptance of the reality of the situation, or does it reject reality? In other words, if I lose control of myself or I try to force something that's not going to happen, does that actually allow me to gain control of the moment? Or do I further lose control of the moment and how I'm responding in the moment? I.e., do I make matters worse for myself by rejecting a situation exactly as it is? So think about those bamboo finger trap toys. You know, the ones that you put your index fingers in, and the more that you struggle and pull away, the more trapped you become, right? That's what we have to identify. The more we struggle in it, the more trapped we become, versus do we give in and let go, which actually releases us from the metaphorical shackles of that situation. So when we think about it that way, radically accepting the moment and not fighting us gives us another set of options, right? They may not be the options that we want. They may not be the options that we would prefer if we had a choice. But once we recognize, we stop struggling with the fact that we are not in control, then we get to pivot and take into perspective, okay, now what? What do I do as a result of this? I'm not going to fight it. So how do I give into this and look at what other options that I have? Back to the tool, what the tool says is that when we actually refuse to accept reality, in other words, when we keep fighting in that finger trap, this keeps us stuck in unhappiness, bitterness, anger, sadness, shame, or other painful emotions. Think about the times in your life where you have been so upset in your mind, in your heart, whatever, about who a person is, what they did to you, why they did it, why they won't change, without any sort of resolution. Like if you've wanted them to change, but they haven't been able to, or if you've tried to talk it through with them and nothing gets resolved, but you still are just perseverating on this in your mind and your heart. Think about like how bitter and angry that actually keeps us. It imprisons us almost, right? And this is the thing that I've struggled with, just, I'm human. I can very much relate to this, where it's like I'm in this rocking chair of my feelings and I'm not going anywhere. I'm just like thinking about how somebody hurt me, or a situation that I didn't have a voice, how I handled something, whatever. And what I'm doing in that is fighting the reality versus actually accepting, okay, this is who they are. This is what they did. This is what situation I was in. This is how I handled it. Then we actually want to figure out what to do as a result of connecting to that versus just fighting the reality of who somebody is, what happened, things essentially that we can't control. So I've said a lot about what radical acceptance is, why we need to use it. And I can also imagine that you're thinking possibly, okay, so you're saying that basically I just need to like roll over and accept people for being lame. I need to just like move on from situations that happened that I didn't like. I need to fully have grace. No, that's not what I'm saying. This is really a matter of how we accept what's happening and do something responsibly versus not accept something that's happening and therefore act irresponsibly as a result of that, okay? So what I love about this DBT tool in general is that it also gives you a caveat of what radical acceptance is not, okay? So radical acceptance is not approval, compassion, love, passivity, or against change. Radical acceptance doesn't mean that you don't try to change things, but what it means is that you only have to radically accept the moment that you're in. Going back to my story, in applying that, it doesn't mean that I was like, okay, well, I just have to love my sister-in-law for who she is anyways, or let me have compassion toward her because she doesn't transition well. No. It's finding a middle ground of connecting with the situation concretely and knowing that I can't change her no matter how hard I try. I don't have to be okay with this, but I have to really recognize exactly what the situation and who the person is and stop trying to fight that or wish that I had control of it when I don't. I hope that makes sense, okay? So again, when we concretely look at the situation, we stop resisting it, we give in, we act responsibly in the moment, then we get to pivot and be like, okay, what choices do I have and how do I respond effectively given what I know versus what I want to happen? So I'll conclude my story. I decided I was going to take my dog for a walk. We started walking, and what was actually really great about this is I just felt a sense of relief that I was like, okay, I've accepted this. I'm not fighting it. I'm just doing it. Miraculously, I don't know if it was miraculously, incidentally, at the same time, my best friend called me. Like, it's 8:35 in the morning at this point. She calls me. She does not call me at 8:35 on a Saturday morning often, but she did. So I talked to her about what was going on. It was really funny because, again, I don't have my phone, so I'm holding my Apple Watch up to my mouth while I'm walking my dog, and we had a good conversation. I felt a lot better. I talked to her for about a half an hour. I got back to my house. She even offered to come over and just hang out with me or, take Buddy and myself somewhere, maybe to CVS so I could have bought a toothbrush and toothpaste. Everything was really good at that period of time because I just accepted that I wasn't going to be able to go to my spirituality group. I had to wait, and I had a different set of options, even though they weren't options that I had preferred. That clear-headed experience actually did something amazing because once I was talking to her and I was like, yeah, you could come over. That would actually be really helpful. Thank you so much. Then I thought, wait a second. I didn't check my whole house. I didn't go around all the way to the back in the creepy part of my backyard that I hate going by because there are spiders there. I didn't check that window to see if I left my bathroom window unlocked. So I told my friend to sit tight. I went back there, managed the spider webs, and lo and behold, I did not seal up that bathroom window. So I was able to get into my house, friends. I jumped up, got in, went around, opened the front door, let my dog in, used the facilities, brushed my teeth, and I was on my way up to North County. When all was said and done, I actually was just an hour and a half late, and I was thinking that I wasn't going to be able to go at all. So that was fabulous. I got there. I told everybody in my group what had happened. We had a laugh about it. I was just so grateful that I got to use the tool. And then like 5 minutes later, my husband texted me saying, oh my gosh, I'm sorry that I just got this. I was out on the trail. Yeah, we do actually have a spare key. And then he proceeds to tell me where it is in the garage. That's where he clarified that the key my sister-in-law had was not our spare key. I was so relieved because I did not lose it on her for something that, as I was worried about, she did not actually have responsibility over. All right, so the biggest takeaway here, which was really humbling, was that had I not used this tool, then I would have reacted differently. I would have reacted negatively. I would have been in the wrong. And I would have negatively affected my relationship with my sister-in-law. So all of that, in retrospect, was just such a relief that I used the tool, that I managed my reaction. I got to have a good laugh actually with my sister afterward when I called her to let her know that she didn't, in fact, have the spare key. And it just worked out much differently, much differently. And that's the tool. All right, so try to use it. Whether you are stuck in traffic and you just wish that you could go, but you can't, or in a situation where you really want to get something done, but you can't because you have something else to do that's taking up your time, space, energy, whatever. Or if you are challenged by a patient, by a coworker, by a situation at work that you just want to be different or you just want to go away, but you can't, or you can't have any control over making any of those things change, move faster, be different, etc. This skill really allows us to be able to slow down, manage our reactivity, and take perspective. So please let me know how it works. Please let me know how it's working for you. If it is working for you, I hope so. Please let me know if you have any questions with it. To me, DBT in general is such a gift, and it helps us just manage a lot of day-to-day things with a different set of clarity about what we can actually do to control the way that we react to things that are out of our control. All right, friends. Well, that's it for this week. That's it for this episode. Please like and subscribe. And it's so weird still me saying this. I also just want you to know that I believe in you. I value you. You are worthy. And I know that you can do difficult things. Thanks, everybody. Take care.